Okay, we've talked about how to tell if two functions are inverses, but now we're going to talk about how to find an inverse function. If you have one function, how do you find its inverse? Well, there are two ways. There's the official four-step method, and there's also our list method that we were using in the last lesson. So remember that we label the inverse of f as f inverse. It looks like f to the -1, but that -1 is not really an exponent. It just looks like 1. It's on the function, so we know that we are supposed to read this f inverse of x. It simply means that this function is the opposite of the original f. So here's just a little quick example using the list method. If we start with a function f of x equals 2x minus 9, we make a list of the things that are happening to the x. Well, the first thing is times 2, and the second thing is minus 9. Remember, we go in the order of operations, PEMDAS. So I make a list, times 2 and minus 9. Now my f inverse should undo those steps in the reverse order. So the opposite of minus 9 is plus 9, and the opposite of times 2 is divided by 2. But now how to get this in function form? Easy. You just put down an x. Let me back that up a little bit here. Put down an x, and now do the first thing that's in your list here. So the first thing I'm going to do to the x is plus 9. And the next thing I'm going to do to the x is divided by 2. But now, every step that you do after the first one works on the whole expression. So it's not just the x divided by 2, but it's the whole thing divided by 2. And that will be your f inverse. Okay, now an introduction to the four-step method, which is what you'll find in your textbook. The first thing is to take out the f of x and replace it with y. We know that f of x is just a y value. Y is easier to write, easier to keep up with and solve for, so we just want to work with one letter, so we take away the function notation. And the next thing to do is to switch x and y. Now this is really the step that makes it go. This is the step that creates the inverse. Now, the third step is to solve for y. This may be the one that'll be a little bit tough for you sometimes, solving for y. And the last thing you do is take away the y and replace it with the f inverse notation, because now you have the function you are left with is not the original function, but it's the inverse. Okay, so let's see an example of that. Here is f of x equals 7x minus 3. I take away the function notation and call it y. I trade places with x and y. So see, this used to say y, now it says x. This used to say x, now it says y. That's exactly what we do. And then you got to solve for y. So the first step would be to eliminate this minus 3. We add 3 to both sides. The next step would be to divide by 7 on both sides. And so now I can see that the 7's cancel, and I'm left with y equals x plus 3 over 7. And I replace the y now with the inverse function notation. Y equals x plus 3 over 7, or f inverse equals x plus 3 over 7. Okay, let's have a showdown. Let's compare the two methods that we know now, the four-step method versus the list method, and see which one comes out the better. The function that we'll use will be f of x equals 3x plus 8. So here's the list method versus the four-step method. In the list method, we make a list of the things that the x is having done to it. So the first thing is times 3. So I put times 3 in the list. Next thing is plus 8. So I put plus 8 in the list. Now F inverse has to undo those steps in the reverse order. So the first thing it should do is undo the minus 3. The next thing is undo the times 3. And then we have to write our function. We take an x, okay, write down your x, then write the first step after it, then write the second step after that. So the first step was just minus 8, and then to that we divide the whole thing by 3. Alright, let's see the fourth step method. Here's our function, y equals 3x plus 8. We took away the function notation. We trade places with x and y. Now we're going to solve for y. We'll do minus 8 on both sides. And then we'll divide both sides by 3. And now we'll take away the y and replace it with the f inverse notation, the inverse function notation. And you can see that the two functions are the same. So it really just is up to you which method you're the more comfortable with. I think this one is less trouble because there's no solving, and that's usually what people object to. So I would recommend that you at least get comfortable with this one, and then maybe only use this one in emergencies. So you can decide which one you like best. Alright, now we're going to find the inverse of x to the third minus 6. And I'm going to use the list method first. The first thing that happens to our x is we do the third power to it. So I used this caret symbol for 3. This is what computer programmers use, so I thought it would be just as easy a way to write it as anything else. I just needed a symbol to stand for my power. And then the next thing that happens after we cube the number, we subtract 6. Okay, so F inverse is first going to have to undo the minus 6 with a plus 6, and then going to have to undo the third power with, guess what? A third root. The opposite of the power is the root. So now when we write our x, the first thing I'm going to do to it is plus 6. And the second thing we do to it is cubed root. And the last thing we do is add the inverse function notation. So our inverse function is the cube root of x plus 6. Now, just in case you are a 4-step method fan, here you go. First thing we do is replace the f with a y, f of x, replace it with y. The next thing we do is change places with the x and the y. And I mean just where you used to write y, you write x. Where you used to write x, you write y. And don't do anything else. Don't move exponents, don't move denominators. Simply switch places with x and y. Now I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So now we have x plus 6 equals y cubed. And now I've got to solve for y. So the last thing I'm going to do is uncube it, and to do that I have to do the cube root of both sides. Okay, so now I have y equals the cube root of x plus 6, and I replace the y with f inverse. And so now you can see that this function and this function are the same. And it really doesn't matter which method you choose as long as you are very, very comfortable with one or the other. And now we're going to find the inverse of x plus 3 all to the 5th power. And I'm going to use the list method. The first thing, if I were to plug in a number for x, the first thing I would have to do to it is add 3. So that goes in my list. And then to that I would do the 5th power. So now my f inverse is going to need to undo the 5th power. Remember, to undo a power you use a root, 5th root. And then I'm going to have to undo the plus 3. That's going to be a minus 3. Okay, now let's write our function. The first thing we'll have to do First thing we'll have to do is the fifth root, because that's our step 1. The next thing we'll have to do is subtract 3, and then, after all the steps are done, we add our F inverse notation. Okay, now the 4-step method. Take out f of x and put in y. Change places with x and y. Now we have to solve it. So the first thing we have to do is get rid of this fifth power. So we'll do the fifth root to both sides. And then the only thing left to do is to isolate the y. We'll do minus 3 on both sides. And then we'll replace the y with the F inverse notation. And that's all there is. Note that they're, again, both the same. Okay, one more. Let's find F inverse for f of x equals 4 over x plus 3. So, if I use the list method, the first thing that's happening to this x is it's being put in the denominator. See? And we know from exponent rules that what makes an x or anything flip to the denominator is a negative exponent. So we could say that this is the negative 1 power, but really all we mean by that is that it's a reciprocal. So that's the first thing. Now the second thing is that reciprocals being multiplied by 4. So that's the second thing in my list. And the third thing is we add 3 to the whole thing. So that's the third step in our list. Now, F inverse, the first thing would be to undo the plus 3 with a minus 3. Then we undo the times 4 with the divided by 4. Then we have to undo the negative 1 power. Now I know the opposite of a power is a root, but I don't think you really want to get into the root, the negative 1 root. Let's just remember that this is a reciprocal. So how do you undo a reciprocal? Well, you do another reciprocal. If you flip it back over, you'll undo the flip. So I put that as my third step, reciprocal. So here's my x. Now the first step is to subtract 3, and the second step is to divide by 4, and the third step is to do a reciprocal, or a negative 1 power. And if I simplify that by flipping it over, okay, that is my inverse function. So F inverse equals 4 over x minus 3. And there is one like this in the homework, so you can use this as a pattern to help you along. And it's a little bit more difficult to do this one by the 4-step method, so that's why I just stuck with the list method here. But the only thing I think might throw you if you're not familiar is that to undo this reciprocal, you need another reciprocal. But if you think about it, that totally makes sense. Because if you had, say, a whole number and you do its reciprocal, how do you undo that reciprocal? You flip it back over again. So a reciprocal is its own inverse. And I hope that that helps you out, and be sure and let me know if you have any questions. Just get some practice.